Hi, everyone. Good evening. Um, Thank you very much for joining. I'm going to give that awkward 30 seconds or so while you all join. Um, but yes, thank you very much for spending your Wednesday evenings with us, whatever time it is where you are, and celebrating the launch of Wild Boar. Um, we have a Hannah already in the comments, but yeah, please do use the chat box. And let us know where you're watching from. It's always really nice to hear where you are, especially as this is a translated book. I imagine we might be international tonight. Ah, Emma's in Riga. Emma from Emma Press. So we are international. Um, Someone from Finland. I might have to lean on Hannah's pronunciation of these places.
Yeah, that's Ekenäs. It's my hometown.
No
My
way.
mom.
Yeah. Wow. Mexico, Spain, Chicago. Okay, this is what we want. Um, you're all very, very welcome. Yeah, and use the chat box throughout. If you have questions for Hannah, we're going to hear reading from the book and chat about it, but we'll definitely have time to answer your questions as well. So just drop them in as you think, and we will. I'll scroll up and down and read them out. There's a Q&A function as well if you're more comfortable with that. But yeah, any way to ask questions, you're very welcome to do so. I think it's slowed down on people attending, so I'll do official hello and welcome to the launch of Wild Boar by Hannah Lutz, translated by Andy Turner. Um, my name's James. I'm the director of the Emma Press and publishers of this book, and I was very happy to be its editor too. So really delighted to join you tonight. In case you don't know about us, the Emma Press, we are based in the Birmingham in the UK. We're a publisher of poetry and prose, founded by Emma Diane Wright in 2012 with a mission of making literature and publishing as welcoming and as accessible as possible. I also always like to say, because we got writers in the room often, that we open submissions twice a year. We publish about 8 to 10 books annually for adults and for children. But I can say we are kind of beyond excited that our first ever novel for adult readers is this from Hannah. And we very gratefully discovered Wild Boar through our open submissions in a proposal from Andy Turner, who provided us with a brilliant sample and a synopsis of this book. Our fiction to date, I'd say, generally had been short stories, often slightly surreal, but always, I guess we think, character driven and poetic in their language and their imagery, and also in leaving some things for the reader to interpret meaning from themselves. So when we started doing novel submissions, we were really thrilled to see Wild Boar doing much of the same kind of things here, telling a story of environmental and personal change through three voices, and approaching this landscape with kind of very different aims. Alongside that, a kind of very compelling narrative centered around the idea of nature and these wild boar kind of fighting back, I guess, in a time of ecological decline. Yeah, so those were probably my initial impressions of the book. And in the next half an hour or so, really delighted to say Hannah's here with us to provide you with your own first impressions by reading from the English language version. And we'll talk about the book, the writing of it, and the themes. And as I say, answer any questions that you have as well. So welcome, Hannah. Um, Firstly, a massive congratulations from us, and a thank you for trusting us with your work, your English language version. I was going to say, firstly, I wonder how that relationship with the translator, Andy Turner, came about.
Yeah. So hi. Hi, James. Hi, everybody. I can't see your faces. Can you see them, James?
No, I meant to say that. Sorry. Yeah, this
Oh,
is a webinar, so everyone can
yeah.
sit, maybe having their breakfast in San Diego. I'm not
Yeah.
sure, but yes.
All right. But I'm imagining all of you, this map of the world. Um, yeah. And yeah, so Andy approached my Swedish publisher um, and asked about rights for the translation, and he just said um, he'd be interested in trying to pitch it. Yeah, if he was allowed to translate a sample, and he did, and then yeah, I think he then I think he tried a bit when the novel was published in Swedish and Danish. But then he didn't really find a home for it, and then he discovered the Emma Press, and yeah, and I mean, yeah, that's just absolutely wonderful for me to be part of your community. Yeah, it's really exciting. Yeah.
We were very welcome. So, how long ago was the book first published then?
Well, it's kind of a weird story because the book was published in translation before it was published in the Swedish original. Yeah, so because I live in Denmark, but I write mainly in Swedish. So I'd written this manuscript in Swedish, but I had spoken to a Danish um, editor, or who had asked me about the book. She'd heard me read from it in Swedish, and she said, um, I'd be really happy to work with a Swedish manuscript, and maybe it could be translated to Danish. So, so actually, yeah, so it ended up being published in Danish in 2017, no, 2016, and then it came in Swedish a year later. Yeah, so I first kind of got to know this book in public in Danish. So that was quite strange. Yeah.
And do you say you wrote the Danish version as well?
No,
You did.
it was translated to Danish, and then I worked on the translation as well. We had some meetings, so I learned a lot of Danish in that process actually, because I'd been living in Denmark for some years, but not that long. So, but I started to get like a sense of the language and the rhythms and poetry of Danish.
And so translation, I've got a couple of. One thing is my ignorance, because you were born, I think, in Finland. Is that correct? Or your hometown, as you said, was Finland, but then you're writing in Swedish and living in Denmark. Is this common? Is this?
I I don't know. Yeah, I guess mm, well, in Finland, there's a Swedish minority, which is quite there's a really rich literary tradition in the Swedish speaking minority in Finland. So I really have a lot to draw on there. And it's a small but really sort of lively community of Swedish speaking Finns, or writers, yeah, Swedish writers in Finland. So yeah, but then my specific situation is a bit confusing also in the editing process, because I've been working in several languages, um, sort of parallel in Swedish and Danish, and so yeah.
So, like, yeah, it sounds like translation is just something that's been throughout your life? Are you quite happy kind of letting go of your work and collaborating with Andy especially? Or is it a push-pull?
Yeah, I mean, I think my dad's American and my mother is a Swedish-speaking Finn. Yeah, so I've grown up with these languages as sort of, I mean, we also spoke a lot of like mixed Swedish and English in my childhood home. So I think there's always this translation happening
Mm.
between languages. And I think that I've really learned, especially since I moved to Denmark, that I don't have this idea of having one voice. I've kind of had to abandon that
Mm.
because my voices are quite different in these different languages, both like as a person, the way I experience myself in the world, um, but also as a writer. It feels like quite different voices. So when Andy started translating the book, at first it was when I read the first version, I it was very strange thinking of that as me in a way or my book, but then um, I think again it was this sort of encountering these different voices that can grow out of the same work in a way was really exciting, but it really didn't feel like I had written that book. Um, but it was more like a friend that I've slowly gotten to know and is sort of familiar and strange at the same time. So yeah.
That sounds a nice description, and also strangely pertinent for this book as a whole anyway. Well, we should probably hear a bit of it first, I guess. I think you were going to read that opening, but we just discussed maybe that you might also read before maybe the first paragraph or so in the original, in the Swedish original, so we can hear that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's I'll do that. And I want to show you these two books. So this is the Swedish one and this is the English one. And yeah, and I think that the Emma Press has done such wonderful work with sort of recreating this atmosphere, but with another image. And that's actually also, well, there are pieces of it throughout the book. Yeah. So I'm gonna read just the first paragraph in Swedish so you can get a sense of yeah, the melody. So the three speakers, they take turns sort of narrating the story, and the first person we're going to hear is called Ritve. And Ritve has arrived to this area of Sweden, like the other two characters also. They've all kind of recently arrived here for different reasons. And here's Ritve. Jag har sett dem, vildsvinen. De har kommit in i mina drömmar. Nu vet jag hur de rör sig, hur det låter när de smyger in i trädgårdarna. Jag måste lyssna omsorgsfullt för att höra deras fötter och trynen i gräset. Att de kan vara så många, så massiva och ändå föra så lite väsen när de rör sig, det är otroligt. Här ligger jag, tung och varm efter sömnen. Öppnar gardinerna. Ser havet. Lakanen i sängen är vita. Okay. And then once more, Ritve. I've seen them, the wild boar. They found their way into my dreams. Now I know the way they move, the sounds they make when they sneak into the gardens. I have to listen carefully to hear their trotters and snouts in the grass. They're so numerous, so solid, and yet they make such light work of quietly moving around. It's incredible. Here I am, heavy and warm with sleep. I open the curtains, see the sea. The sheets on the bed are white. This is what I know of Hornanes. To get there, I'll make my way to Småland, to Tingsryd, and midway between Tingsryd and Linneryd, I'll turn right. In the village, there are 4 or 5 occupied houses, 3 or 4 abandoned ones. In a yellow house, surrounded by apple trees, lives Arnold Farkberg. The language is made up of lakes and productive forest. Wild boar hunting is permitted throughout the year. Arnold Falkberg often has a camera with him when he's in the forest. Many people film wild boar, most focusing on the hunting. I've seen the clips they post on YouTube. In a Swedish TV documentary, Arnold Falkberg is known as the hunter of Hornanes. His hunting rifle propped against the armchair during the interview. But now I've seen the footage he's posted, I don't believe he's fired a shot at a single wild boar in his life. The hand holding that camera is intent on something completely different. I was so moved by the films that I bought a ticket from Finland in the middle of high season. I'm sitting on the sun deck watching the islands drift by, the Stockholm archipelago and its terraces and towers, so quaint, a warm embrace. The people on the islands have woken up and are lying on rocks and jetties, reading. We sail by, eclipsing their morning sun for a moment. Passengers on deck are waving at the shore and taking photos. Some people turn their faces to the ship, waving back.
Right. Sorry, let me deal with the technicalities there. I didn't want to meet you with silence. That was brilliant. Thank you, Hannah, and lovely to hear it in Swedish as well, and follow along and pretend I could guess some words in Swedish. Like Ritve kind of comes into the community, kind of really looking to experience the wild boar in some way, and like, having become a bit obsessed with them and also with the hunter, which is great. But it's like for me, I think reading it again recently is just that kind of longing for connection that ultimately that Ritve has, both to connect with the animals and the land, but like so it's kind of mirrored in the difficulty that they have connecting with humans too, right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, yeah, I think actually all of the 3 characters, Ritve, Mia, and Glenn. Well, originally I tried to actually create this sort of collective where I wanted all these characters to live together, and I was trying to force them into community somehow because I wanted to write about people living together, and but it really didn't work, and I couldn't get them to talk to each other. Like the text became very boring and sort of I don't know, the life kind of like or they didn't, I guess they didn't come to life. The relationships didn't really come to life. But I like these people. They just couldn't connect with each other. So I ended up sort of trying to get to know them through letting them monologue and speak about what they were experiencing sort of separately.
Mm.
And it turned out, yeah, they're all quite lonely. And Ritve especially, I think, has sort of this sense that the wild boar, they know how to be a community, or they know how to be together. So yeah, so Ritve has this, yeah, senses this and starts to dream about the boar and the way that their bodies are sort of this like, yeah, this physical community, but also sort of like when the leader, the main, yeah, the wild boar, who is kind of like the leader of the sounder, makes a decision, the others sort of will follow along and trust that. And yeah, and I think that these three characters don't really know what their compass should be, I guess. And Ritve tries to somehow, yeah, connect with the boar through going out into the woods. And I guess they end up encountering themselves instead, and the landscape, but the boar are hiding.
Yeah. Uh, yeah, that's beautifully put. We should talk about the boar because we have three characters, but I guess the central character, the title characters, even I guess, are the wild boar. Um, could you tell us a bit about the boar and why they kind of inspired this story?
Yeah, well, actually, I had some conversations with a person who also ended up in a book, or I guess it's some version of him, a man called Per Anders, who I met here in Sweden, in this woods where the book takes place. And I arrived there with a lot of my friends, because we bought this old schoolhouse together in the south of Sweden. Most of us were living in Denmark at the time, and yeah, so we're 30 people that bought this house together, not to live, or not to live there all the time, but to do all kinds of different things and projects together and do our own work. And yeah, so I came to this part of Sweden as an outsider, as a newcomer. And I yeah, as soon as we arrived, I sort of picked up on this conversation about the wild boar, which seemed to be um, what everybody was talking about, our neighbors, and especially Per Anders, who came over and told us, gave us some tips on how to keep them out of our garden. And there were these flyers also that were handed out about this big meeting to kind of fight the boar, and to yeah, together to try to sort of deal with this huge problem of the wild boar taking over. Um, and I thought that was kind of intriguing. And then Per Anders was talking about this problem, but also telling us these local myths about wild boar. Um, and I thought, okay, well, I think I need to, go out into the woods at night and try to meet these animals. And but I spent years visiting this house a lot and never saw any wild boar. So I started writing instead, and getting really interested in this specific animal, because their story is also yeah, quite strange. and interesting the way that they've disappeared from Sweden and returned again. But I don't know if I should tell that story now, if I should.
Oh no, I think you should. I think when I can't remember at what point, if it was in editing, even might have even been the blurb. I think maybe we said that they'd rewilded or something, and you had to correct us. So what is the story around there?
Yeah, so they are native to Sweden, or they arrived in Sweden around the same time as humans. So after the latest ice age, or when, yeah, it's like over 10,000 years ago. But then probably in the 1600s, it's a bit, there are lots of different versions of the story, but they were hunted so intensely and domesticated also that they actually disappeared from the woods, or there were no more wild boar in Sweden. And then in the early 1900s, there were some wild boar brought to Sweden from other countries, and they were kept in these inside these fenced in, so that they could be hunted, but still wouldn't be, roaming the woods. But then they started escaping. So in the sort of 70s, 1970s, 80s, there were these big sort of groups of wild boar that kind of escaped, and they're really good at reproducing or procreating. Yeah, like now there are 300,000 wild boar, something like that, in Sweden. Um, and there was this whole debate about, are they an invasive species? And they were considered an invasive species until the 80s, where they were sort of officially declared to be native again. But it's just, this whole conversation about who's invasive and who's native to a place, or what animals we want. What animals and plants are considered native, and which ones are considered invasive. That conversation can seem really xenophobic sometimes, and that really struck me when I was reading about the boar, that there's so much anger towards them, and I mean, and a lot of people still consider them invasive and use that language. Um, and I think it's actually more about money, and about that they're rowdy and they're really good at surviving, and they're really good at adapting to new environments. But people think, they leave ugly marks in the gardens and they ruin the crops, which of course that's a problem, but it's also just, I mean, I think that's not enough to call a species invasive, that we think they're annoying.
And it flags up kind of like one of the other interesting parallels in the book as well, about migration and of everybody. I should say that obviously it's only 100 pages, I think, that we put it, and it's got so much in environment and ecology, but yeah, migration and memory and isolation and loneliness, as we just discussed. But yeah, let's hear some more. I think. Should we hear some from one of the other characters?
Yeah. Okay, so let's jump to Glenn, who works in the municipality and sort of distributes money for different cultural projects in the area, and takes care of this. There's also this residency, this old schoolhouse that's been transformed to a kind of residency, local residency, for different kinds of projects, which one of the other characters is staying at. But Glenn is sort of the municipality person who makes that happen. Glen. Very little land came with the house. The forest around us is owned by big business, and business transforms the landscape from day to day. The trees are being felled in great swaths to create space for new ones to be planted. This is where they were born, my grandmother, grandfather, their forefathers, and where they lived and died. And so it continues, or it begins again. It could be called returning to your roots, but no one around here remembers my relatives. Their houses were small and looked like all the others. The sum of their lives left no obvious traces behind. Tingsryd, not the most beautiful district in Sweden. There's something reassuring in that. And this, too, is something to love. Here I am on the grass, far from Malmö, fanning off the sweat and scratching my chest. It's cool and partly cloudy, wind from the southeast. I've woken early, already mown the lawn. Martina is still in bed. Saturday and 3 weeks to the holidays. The garden is already heavy with foliage, and moisture from the night still lingers. I don't want to say anything to Martina, but I'm starting to feel something. She would call it the connection, which she's been waiting for. It's coming, she says. I say. I get tired thinking about the connection. That's not what I'm feeling. It's not the sense of belonging to my kin and history, but something else. Something lighter. Fields and lakes, vast and desolate, monotonous forests extending in all directions. Here I'm nobody special, just whoever you like, roaming the area, keeping up with the changes in the landscape, the work in the forest and the big gravel pit full of water, clear and transparent, turquoise like the Mediterranean. I think it must be warm too. I saw someone swimming there.
Thank you. I don't want to reveal myself too much, but I confess I felt quite a strong relationship with Glenn in this story. Partly since it used to be my job to give out arts grants.
Oh yeah.
Although he seemed to have less constraints on his funding, which is great. But also, I guess when I read this, I just pretty recently moved out of London to a new place. And there's something about moving and migration in the book, obviously, as we talked about how the boar move across the landscape. But also, I think, as you said, all these characters have come fairly recently. And is there something in the desire to kind of move somewhere remote to live and then convince yourself that you're happy and that you've made the right decision? There's that great relationship with his sister Martinez, with his partner's sister, who kind of challenges their move and their motivations to move out of the city. Yeah, and you said yourself you've moved not too long ago, I guess, more remotely. Is that something that you were interested in capturing as well?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think I was living in Copenhagen when we bought this house in the woods, and it's a house that's is quite similar to the house I grew up in, which that was in the Finnish countryside, but there was this sense of return and newness at the same time, I think, for me, and I was thinking a lot about just what it means to be a guest or a newcomer in a place, and what it means to connect to the landscape, and sort of what it means to become yeah, part of a community, a new community, and sort of with respect for its history and um, yeah, and I think yeah, both when it comes to like the humans living there, but also the other species, like what trying to understand where we've arrived when we came to this specific house. But I think in general, yeah, I moved to the countryside in Denmark and moved quite recently to a new community, and this sort of position of being an yeah, sort of an outsider or a newcomer, but maybe looking for but maybe yeah, encountering also yourself again and again in these different spaces, but also trying to yeah, like being humble about um being a guest or an um yeah, a sort of what yeah, just becoming um a part of a new community takes time. um yeah, and I think also because I really wanted to write about this area, but I didn't grow up there, and I felt like I wanted to explore that position of yeah, through three different people, but the position of being yeah, a newcomer.
Yeah. Well, I want to make sure that we've got time to hear from all three. So, would you like to read from Mia? And I can see one question, but yeah, please do while you're listening. Um, drop any questions that you might have, and we'll make sure that we get around to asking them before we finish.
Great. I'm gonna tell my family to keep it down a bit because I think they're a little bit loud in the other room. Just a
Oh
second.
yeah. Feel like I should have prepared something for this eventuality, but there it is. I couldn't hear them.
Okay, I don't know if it was getting
No,
through
we couldn't
as
hear it,
well,
but
but they're reading good night stories, so um so yeah, let's hear from Mia. Um and I don't think I'll say much except that oh yeah, so Mia's the one who's staying in this house that used to be a school and now has been turned into this residency where you can come and work on projects connected somehow to the local area. And her grandfather used to go to this school, and she's hoping that staying in this familiar place will might help him um, remember and might help him find his voice again because he's kind of stopped talking. So here's Mia. Granddad needs some fresh air. Fuck the rain. We take cover beneath the dripping trees. We walk down the path. I take his hand. Our wellies squelch in the moss. I wipe the snot and rain off my face. I ask him what the mushrooms are called. I point to them one after another. Keep talking, Mia. Keep talking. I keep talking. I feel stupid. I pretend to be more stupid than I am. Granddad, what's a death cap? He must hate me. I mean, we're both adults now. Is this love? Or is it murder? Am I the one who's ultimately destroying him? The more I speak, the further he moves out of sight. I walk by his side, tending to him. Granddad, you can live through my strong body. He hardly looks at the mushrooms. I don't know if he's cold in the rain. I've wrapped a big yellow raincoat around him. He isn't wearing it. He's just underneath it. I have a small tape recorder with me just in case. You never know if he might start talking. Here I am, fumbling with the recorder, trying to protect it from the rain, taping all the sounds around me that are not Granddad. What do I think I'm doing? What's the use in me crying? Is this love?
So nice. Thanks. And then, yeah, it feels like they're sort of almost the highest stakes of all the characters, Mia, um, and a kind of another kind of longing for connection, but like another type of rekindling, I guess, that she's hoping for.
Yeah.
Yeah. How
Yeah.
did that relationship come to you?
Yeah. I don't really know how. I think yeah, in the beginning Mia and her grandfather were there among all these other people, and I could tell like this wasn't good. That they, because Mia was kind of wanting to live in this community with her grandfather, and it just, yeah, that really wasn't working. So I tried, so I sort of explored this, yeah, what would happen if just the two of them were in this huge house full of all these, these ghosts, sort of, or these, yeah, the presence of all these school children that have gone there, and all these stories that this granddad used to tell me, all these really interesting stories about his childhood and his yeah, his time at this school. um so I think sort of the more mythological level of like my encounter with the wild boar as this figure that was also just, even the people who were angry with them and upset seemed fascinated by this very large, powerful animal that was so, also just so secretive somehow. So yeah, so Mia and her granddad are kind of, well, Mia's trying to in different ways engage him in conversation and hoping he'll connect with something. And among other things, she starts to try to engage him in play, where there is this sort of mythological, wild boar, um, that becomes part of the game.
Yeah, won't spoil where it goes, but yeah, really beautiful characters, uh, and brilliantly imagined. Thank you for talking about them. I'll ask Susan's question, and then if anyone else has got a question, um, as I say, do put it in. Susan said, Hannah, you speak of different voices. This goes back to when we were talking about translation at the start. Different voices resulting from different languages. Um, every language has its own strengths and perspective on time as well. Were you surprised at all when you read the final copy of the two translations? And did you like all or part of either more than the original Swedish that you wrote?
Mm, yeah. No, that's really exciting. Actually, I think in the Danish translation, there was some of the dialogue that was much more exciting and fun and lively. Um, and some of the characters landed really well in Danish. Um, and some of them seemed a little bit more awkward, I think, in Danish. But I did feel that they transformed quite a lot. Um, and in the English version, I'm really still getting to know the characters in English. And I have a sense that they are really like their own. Yeah, in this book, they're kind of their own people. They're these new, in a way, these new characters, and I think there's just a different poetry to each language, and I think the specificity of each language is what's so exciting, because sometimes I really struggled with learning Danish, for example, and moving between languages. I keep sort of losing the sense of who I am, I guess, sometimes. But also then there's this specificity in each version that is really kind of exciting to surrender to that. That, you know, a certain scene, like, yeah, I think the rooms become quite different in English. And I think also this question of time is really exciting in different languages, because my sense is also that time sort of moves differently in these different versions, and also it's been 9 years since the first one came out, so since the Swedish or the Danish version came out, so there are all these layers of time too at play.
I don't know, I can't remember if I asked you this towards the start. Do you write in English ever? Would you be tempted to?
I do a little bit sometimes, but not much, actually. So it's not. I mean, I speak a lot of English and I read a lot in English,
Mhm.
but it still feels daunting to me that there are so many words in English, and I don't know how one goes about sort of selecting them, because there's in Swedish and Danish there are. I mean, of course, there are a lot of words, but I mean, not that many compared to English. So I think that's the most daunting thing about writing in English is sort of how would I go about that?
Yeah, too many words. I think that might be a nice place to leave the English language launch of Wild Boar. Thank you so much, Hannah, again, for trusting us with your work, obviously, but for joining us and reading some stuff. I am going to put some links. I'm stalling because I'm putting some links in the chat. The link to the book, of course, if you haven't got a copy already, or your friends don't have copies already, then please do buy one from the website or from your local bookshops. And if you've enjoyed this event and Hannah's work, and are interested in what we do, then please do join our newsletter. Second link. Yeah, that's the first place that we tell you about our writing submissions, calls, and our new books, and give exclusive content from the authors, as in a very low stakes, not very often way. The only other final thing to say is, if you're on social media or anything and have the book, then please do share a picture of it or your thoughts on it. It really does make a difference. We're a small press, and yeah, that can really be helpful, and we'll share it and get the word out about Wild Boar. But yeah.
Thank you so much, James, for your questions, and Susan for your question, and everybody for being here to sort of to celebrate this this launch. Yeah.
And we'll try and get Hannah over. If you are in the UK, we'll try and get Hannah over at some point later in the year and get some events in person as well. But in the meantime, yeah, thank you very much for joining us, and we'll hope to see you again soon. Thank you, Hannah.
Thank you.
Back.